Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having this hearing. Jeremy Smith here on behalf of the State Building and Construction Trades Council. We represent about 400,000 unionized construction workers in over 150 different unions throughout California. And we want to thank you for having this hearing, the second hearing of the Select Committee. We hope it's the second of many. We feel like, along with the budget subcommittees on both sides, this committee can supplement a critical oversight role, not only on this incentive grant, but the state of CTE in general. So thank you for doing this. Thank you all for being here today. I would agree with everything everybody said the last 5 minutes. It's nice to hear some of the same terms members of the Get Real Coalition, which I'm a part of, along with Ms. Rice, have been saying for several years. Require funded measure, a categorical with accountability. These are things I think it's been proven that on the ground, people who are dealing with these things know what they need, and they need that accountability. So I want to start by saying that I'm going to talk about a couple things. First, why we're involved in this fight for more CTE funding, and then the state of funding as we see it. Because there's a lack of accountability, there aren't these courses on the ground in high schools, particularly for kids to get interested in a world of work with their hands. And because not every kid dreams of being a construction worker when they're 5 years old or 10 years old or when they're teenagers. And most families fall into the same trap that, frankly, lots of policymakers have fallen into. They don't think about that world of work. Most families, unless they're in the trades already, also don't push their kids into those careers. They want their kids to go to college. They want, the grandparents, the parents, the guardians of these kids want them to have a better life than they had. And just like in this building for several years, it's getting better. Parents think that means a 4-year college education, and it just doesn't. There's a world of work out there for kids to make a middle-class livelihood without having to go to a 4-year college. So there's a built-in limit to how many young men and women choose a career in the trades. So providing a limited amount of exposure to that world, as we are now and as will continue to happen if the incentive grant runs out, already exacerbates a worrisome problem. The problem is that kids just aren't exposed to the full range of career choices that sit before them. They don't know that there's a lifetime of work out there for them that does not require going to a 4-year university, does not require racking up a mountain of debt, does not require them to sit through classes and sweat getting good grades in classes that aren't relevant to what they care about and what they're going to do with the rest of their lives. Higher education is important. There's just other types of higher education. A 3 to 5 year apprenticeship program is higher education. The state's apprenticeship system currently is robust and effective. There's 63,000 active apprentices in the state's apprenticeship system right now. Not all of those are in the building and construction trades. A vast majority are. But that number could be higher. We think part of the reason it's not as high is because the kids just aren't being exposed to it at the high school level. There is so much pending work out there, built up demand for work, that the 63,000 number could double, and there would still be enough work for construction apprentices to journey through and become journeymen and women. There's a couple words that are used a lot in this building as pertains to public pensions, called unfunded liability. There's another unfunded liability in the state. It's a $70 billion deferred maintenance backlog. $70 billion of construction on the state's infrastructure, roads, bridges, tunnels. The demand for that work is there, or the work is there to push the demand for workers. So getting these kids involved in apprenticeship programs in their early 20s so they start that world of work earlier is important. Furthermore, over the last 3 years, the legislature has decided that on several different types of private and public construction projects, there needs to be a skilled and trained workforce employed, quote unquote, skilled and trained. What that means is a certain percentage of the workers on every job site must be graduates of state-approved apprenticeship programs or must be apprentices in state-approved apprenticeship programs. This is to help with health and safety on the job and to keep the public safe. So in terms of deferred maintenance and ongoing public policy, there is a demand for more apprentices. And that demand can best be met by exposing these young men and women to the world of apprenticeship, to the world of working with their hands in high school. Furthermore, something that isn't really ever discussed is that construction workers are different than other classes of workers in the sense that construction is a really hard career. It breaks your body down, and construction workers tend to retire much earlier than their counterparts in other sectors of the economy. If you start when you're 20 or 21 years old and you work for 25 years, you can retire at 45 or 50 years old as long as your pension is funded. That's a whole other hearing. But it happens all the time, mainly because these workers just wear out. And so you have a career, you retire at 50, you can stay retired or you can do something else. It's a wonderful way to make a living. And then if you get these kids into their apprenticeship programs early enough, when they don't have a family to take care of, when they're just on their own, they can save the money they're making, pre-fund their retirement plans, get health care, do all these things that their counterparts in the four-year university aren't doing. They aren't working. They're racking up mountains of debt. And that's the beauty of apprenticeship, is it's earn while you learn. So the need is there. We have an aging workforce, a workforce that wears out sooner, and the work is there. Again, a $70 billion deferred maintenance backlog that just provides ample opportunity for kids graduating high school to begin an apprenticeship program and have a career. And I'm going to finish with a couple points on funding. The primary theme here is that all of the policy and accountability incentives of the 11-volume, 7,000-page education code ignore or undermine CTE. The only driver propping these programs up are dedicated funding streams directly tied to career preparation programs. The most important funding streams currently include, in California, the CTE incentive grant. The heavy majority of funding we've heard today and anecdotally of these programs comes out of that incentive grant, but there's also partnership academies and the agricultural incentive grant money devoted to CTE. They all have strict accountability. Federally, there are Perkins grants, which do require the state to match with their own vocational education investments, which the incentive grants help justify. That's essentially it. So California should not diminish or suspend its financial commitment to CTE in the foreseeable future. If that is done before all of the other policy and accountability drivers have been adequately addressed to include robust career readiness incentives, all CTE in California will be in jeopardy. We need to ensure that CTE exists for those kids who decide they want to work with their hands so they can be exposed to it early. We need to ensure that there's a place for them to go during the school day that energizes their minds and activates their desire to learn. And everyone can benefit from a higher education, but let's not fall into the trap that a higher education must mean a four-year college degree. Thank you.
Go, Dealing.
Thank you for those remarks, and I have to leave momentarily. The one thing I just want to say for the record with everybody here is I do think it's important as we think about all of the issues related to CTE that we recognize the scale of the investment that the building trades and similar organizations and groups make in the skills of their members and their workers. And I understand, Jeremy, I'm sure you have a better number than I do, but along the lines of $100 million a year is what is invested in the skills of the members of the Building Trades Council. So I just think it's important as we think about CTE generally that we think about ways to support that. And I apologize I can't stay for Ms. Rice. Fortunately, we've had plenty of chances to talk before, but this is a really important subject, and I thank you for convening it.
Thank you for coming. Just to stay on time, Nicole Rice, Policy Director, California Manufacturing and Technology Association. Why don't you go ahead?
Thank you, Assemblymember Burke, and for everyone else who has come. We're excited always to talk about career tech education and what we can do to ensure that these programs grow in California. So, as you stated, Chair, my name is Nicole Rice. I'm with the California Manufacturers and Technology Association, and also a co-chair along with Jeremy Smith from the Building Trades for Get Real, which is an organization that's singly dedicated to ensuring that all students, and I I want to emphasize that all students have access to high-quality, industry-aligned CTE programs, courses, and pathways, as we discussed this afternoon. So I want to lay the framework of why we care. Why is this such an important issue to the manufacturers? And basically, there's two words: retiring workforce. The average age of a manufacturing worker is about 56, 57 years old. So we have a workforce that is retiring, and when that workforce retires, we are going to need to be able to replace them with skilled workers. But because manufacturing has evolved at the time frame that these workers have been with us in this industry, we're going to need higher skilled, higher trained individuals that are more innovative to come in and help the manufacturing industry in California continue to be competitive in a increasingly global marketplace. So it's important for us to be able to have students who have exposure to industrial trades early on. As Mr. Smith indicated, kids, they developed these aptitudes for things as they're exposed to it, and this should be a critical part of their learning experience. It's not whether you're going to go and do CTE or you're going to go to college. It's a myriad of options that students should have, and our education opportunities and experience should provide for them. So as manufacturers, we too have invested in our workforce, training new employees and incumbent workers as they've been drawn to the industry. We realize as an industry that there is an advertising or marketing, if you will, problem that we have, because when people think of manufacturing, they think of the smoky smokestacks and people on assembly lines. But manufacturing is high skilled, it's automated, it's computerized, there are cool things happening there, and it's a great career for to be able to care for your family, take care of your family, yourself, to provide for your health care, your retirement, and really have a stable middle-class lifestyle, which a lot of California policymakers are wanting for their residents. So manufacturing is a great career option, and we encourage young folks to think about it. But unfortunately, they're not being exposed to it in the traditional education arena. So while funding is important, and we talked a lot today about the funding of career tech education, and it is important and it's paramount to ensuring the sustainability of these programs, as you heard, but equally important that we discussed today is ensuring that the programs are producing relevant skills that are important for in-demand industries, just like manufacturing. So not only do the supporters of our Get Real Coalition, which is a broad-based coalition, as I said, of business, educators, agriculture, and such, not only do we want the state to maintain its current level and commitment to CTE funding, which we do appreciate the governor providing this type of transitional funding, but again, it is temporary and it is transitional. But we also want to make sure that the state ensures that these infinite dollars are only invested in high-quality, industry-aligned programs. We believe that the incentive grant strikes the balance between funding and accountability with the criteria that's embedded in the incentive grant. But it's not, and no one should be surprised by these criteria. As Mr. Smith indicated, there are other programs out there, the federal Perkins dollars. Any district that's been receiving Perkins grants for any length of time should not be surprised by the criteria that is part of the accountability of the incentive grant. And in particular, I want to talk about one particular criterion that's in the grant, and that's the industry advisory committees. As a condition of receipt of these incentive grants, the active participation of a district-level advisory group comprised of real employers and labor partners, much like you see here with our Get Real Coalition, help to develop meaningful curriculum. They help to provide work-based learning opportunities and professional development opportunities, and also can help with build up these programs where you need to have more modern and relevant equipment. As Russ pointed out, we're seeing the development of those partnerships, and they're real and they're important, and they're actually helping to move the needle to create these industry-relevant programs. And these are meaningful components that when you measure the success of a program, looking at the industry's involvement is important. The comment was made about the sporadic nature of these programs. And we would agree that courses themselves in these programs need to be nimble to respond to industry's needs and the demands that we're getting from labor market data regionally. But the offerings of the courses themselves cannot be sporadic, because the cost to run these programs or to replace them when they're gone, as Mr. Hadley pointed out, are huge. And that's part of the state's investment. The state is losing its investment every time one of these programs closes. And it also impacts the industry's partnership. It has a direct correlation to the industry's willingness and participation to engage. And when you see the sporadic nature of these programs, that really impacts our ability to really see if this investment is worthwhile. And then also there was a comment made about categorical programs and the accountability associated with that. And I'd also like to make a point that a categorical program actually demonstrates prioritization by the state of these types of programs and their inclusion in a student's education experience. So an effective CTE program should inspire and prepare students for the real-world jobs and the entrepreneurial opportunities that are available for them in the 21st century economy. Whether they enter into that competitive arena initially upon graduation, or whether they go on to attain a postgraduate level education and training. And we're not just training next generation of workers, but as the principal from Elk Grove indicated, we are training and building our next leaders. So that is important. So while we've laid a good foundation thus far, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And we are, as manufacturers, are excited about the work that's before us and are committed to being part of that conversation. Thank you.
So my question is for either one of you or both of you, actually. My question would be, employees and labor partners, would the actual largest deterrent to getting involved in CTE programs past where you're involved now, would that be the lack of funding or the lack of sustainable funding for those programs?
Yes, so I think your question is, what is the biggest deterrent for getting involved? And what I hear from my membership is it is the funding. It's having these sustainable programs. They are encouraged to come to the table and discuss about curriculum development and things of that nature and how to promote manufacturing as a career option. But a lot of times they're one-off opportunities. And so, to use a term of art from the industry, it's about the return on the investment. If businesses cannot see what their tangible return on investment will be, I like to say my guys are out there making things. And so that's their primary commitment. And while they're willing to come to the table to help build these programs and invest in their pipeline, if they can't see an immediate or even a long-term return on their investment, they're likely to not be as involved, and not that they're not going to help to continue to build that pipeline. They'll just do it in-house and invest their own resources because they know when they come out of that process, they will have a qualified worker who can step into those jobs.
Your question was, what are the primary deterrents of these programs? I would agree with what Nicole just said, and I would add, kind of expand on your question a little bit. One of the primary deterrents to these programs is finding teachers, and so that the Get Real Coalition has talked about that being the next thing we engage in. Is providing a pipeline of teachers, and that pipeline can come from the CSU system, which where it traditionally comes from, but it's dwindling a lot. But it can also come from retired manufacturing CEOs or shop managers or whatever the term is in your world. But it can also come from as I said, the retired 50-year-old plumbers or carpenters who are looking for another career now. One of the concerns we have is that even though our guys and gals have retired and may have a good pension or may have saved and don't need to work, they go back to work for a school district, or they look into it, and they even though they don't need the money, quote unquote, they're still going to get paid. They can't move along the same pay scale as their colleagues who are who not only have been teaching for longer, but have a teaching certificate, a degree about how to be a teacher outside of the subject matter credential. And so that's a concern we have in attracting retirees to fill that void is, nobody expects them to work for free. They shouldn't work for free, but if they are working and getting paid, they should be able to be counted and treated as a teacher and move along a pay scale similar to their colleagues.
Thank you. I want to thank my panelists, and I want to open up for public comment.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, Chris Walker on behalf of the California Association of Sheet Metal and Air Conditioning Contractors, representing 300 contractors statewide that are signatory to collective bargaining agreements with the sheet metal workers. And we are the ones that are helping invest in the apprenticeship programs and investing that $100 million a year in the future training of the craft trades folks that will continue to maintain and build California. We'd like to first thank this committee, thank the chair, thank Assembly Members Hadley, Wood, O'Connell, Santiago for being here today. It shows the importance and the priority for this body that this career technical education, the resuscitation of what I would call vocational education as a primary part of our public education system is important. The members of Cal SMACNA, which is the sheet metal contractors, have made this a statewide priority for their legislative program. Now, it's kind of an interesting thing. Why would a bunch of contractors, men and women, make this a priority? They do have apprenticeship programs. They do grow their own. But guess what? They see how they came to be successful. And it's not just a pathway to middle class. It's a pathway to upper class as well. These are men and women, successful businesswomen who have made their own businesses. They're CEOs. And they see the pathway that career technical education, vocational education provided to them in the past that's not being afforded to kids today, and they see it as an injustice. One of the concerns about teacher shortages, you're not going to tackle the problem with teacher shortage unless you look at the breakdown of higher education system in California. To be honest, as University of California kept increasing their admissions criteria, the CSU system felt compelled to adopt their same A to G criteria with a few minor differences. In the past, Cal State University criteria was somewhat different. And we heard earlier, we don't want one-off classes. We want a sequence of career technical education courses. There's only so much time in the day. And if you're going to have a sequence of courses, you're eating into the criteria that reward you for admissions to UC and to CSU. As a result of this kind of convergence of the two admissions criteria for the two universities, we don't have people coming through the CSU system with an industrial arts background who want to become an industrial arts instructor, credentialed instructor. And so the number of credentialed teachers that we're producing is as anemic as it ever has been in the state of California. We do not have the capability to meet the need. So then we look to industry, to our folks that have retired, to others that want to come out of industry and work in the schools. They're held to the lowest pay standard that you can imagine because they don't have a BA. Well, we ran a bill that would look at giving 3 years of experience in the field, the equivalent of a BA, to allow them to march up the pay scale. That was roundly rejected by certain groups because it's the prerogative of the local bargaining unit. The local bargaining unit is a school of 150 teachers. 148 of them have BAs. Are they going to bargain for the two people who don't? And so this is the real world dynamic that we're in, and we're not solving the problem. So thank you very much for your dedication and for your focus. Let's get the teacher problem solved. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask everyone so we can stay on time to keep your comments to 2 minutes.
Even less, Madam Chair. Chris McCaley on behalf of CompTIA, the Computing Technology Industry Association, one of the leading tech associations nationwide and in California. I want to join Mr. Walker and thank you for your continued leadership in this area. As you know, CTE is an attempt to provide real-world opportunities, hopefully that will lead to good-paying, high-skilled jobs, particularly in our industry. I think CompTIA's main focus is while we appreciate the current funding for CTE, our focus is ensuring that there is longevity in that state funding. So we would encourage you in that regard to ensure that there is that continued stable funding. Thank you.
Jerry Shelton, on behalf of 4 elected county superintendents of schools, Tim Taylor in Butte County, Barbara Nemco in Napa County, Bill Cerrone in Santa Barbara County, and Jim Iovino in Fresno County. They are all firmly committed to supporting CTE. And also, Madam Chair knows that I work with KROP, the Association for Career and College Readiness Organizations, but you have Charlie Hoffman, our president-elect, at the table here. We'd like to thank you for convening this select committee and for the issue that you're addressing, and know that you have our support into the future in your efforts. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Ernie Silva. I work for Sciatech. We're a network of dropout recovery high schools, and in your November 4th hearing, you heard from one of our staff too. I just wanted to come to say again thank you and to highlight that we have over 9,000 young men and women who have formerly dropped out of high school, re-engaged, and it's because of Career Tech. It's because of the relevance that they see. That's the most important piece, and I've heard people mention relevance. I just wanted to really emphasize that Career Tech education is relevant for young men and women who have been dropped out or pushed out of high schools, and we want to do all that we can. The incentive grants have allowed us to add an advanced manufacturing pathway, an agricultural technology pathway, and a healthcare professions pathway, and we look forward to moving on with you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Chairwoman. And my name is Jim Omlid. I am a former ROP teacher and administrator at Mission Valley ROP in Fremont, joint power agreement. And I just wanted to just say a couple of things maybe that haven't been said, besides thank you so much for the opportunity. I watched hundreds of high school math kids every year come through the ROP, and we had a math and construction program that was combined. And these kids ran across the parking lot to get to their construction class. And I asked several of them, why do they do this? Why do they like it? Well, it's the connection that they make with their hands. Their hands, hands are connected to your brain. And so this is a scientific fact. And so when kids early in their career are motivated to get their hands on something in this 3D world, it has an impact on their brain that they don't get with a pencil and paper. So keep the CTE funding. The CTE program is the only reason that some of these kids stay in school. So there's intangible benefits that you don't see in a report. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Pat Whalen, Ellison Wilson Advocacy here on behalf of the Southern California Regional Occupational Center. I'd just like to say thank you, Madam Chair, and the rest of the committee members for holding this hearing. Just 2 real quick points. One, on the issue of dedicated funding versus the LCFF, I don't think it's an either or. The reality is we've been in business since 1967, and the vast majority of that time we were funded by direct state funding. And we understand that the environment has changed under this administration, but I would suggest that you look at it in this way, whether it's coming from the state or the locals. When the money comes from the state, it represents really 2 things. One, it's the appropriation of money, but coupled with that is a policy judgment that you as a legislative body decide that CTE deserves a priority. If you're going to decouple that under the LCFF, that's fine, but you need to, that doesn't absolve you from making the same policy judgment. And some of the suggestions that I heard about using some of the criteria in the CTE incentive grant or otherwise incentivizing the locals to make the right decision, I think is paramount. And the second point, I was intrigued by the chairman's comment about the 70% of students who don't go to college. I would suggest respectfully it's even worse because quite honestly, of the 30% that go to college, the ones that come out with a degree in English literature or philosophy, maybe those are great pursuits, but they're going to end up serving coffee at Starbucks to the folks, Jeremy's members, who get good middle-class jobs, and that's what we need to focus on. So thank you.
Thank you, Jim Ashwan, Executive Director of the California Ag Teachers Association. A lot of this talk today about the incentive grants is not new for us. We've had an ag incentive grant since the early 80s, mid-80s, and I can tell you that standards matter. And so kind of this suggestion that you can have accountability and not have standards is completely erroneous. The interesting thing about the current Career Tech Incentive Grant is that it does have standards that go away when the funding stops, because the standards are contained in this Career Tech Incentive Grant funding. This is not a categorical. It's an incentive grant. If you don't want to play, don't apply. But the districts did step up this year. This past year, which hasn't been mentioned yet, there were over $900 million offered up by districts who said, we get it, we understand the rules, we're committed. And the state said, terrific, we wanted you to get all the support together, but we're not going to match it. And so we have districts that got less than 30% help. Now, their industry partners came to the table and said, we're ready. And a lot of those districts didn't get anywhere near the funding that they expected and needed. The gap's going to get bigger over time. This discussion has got to focus on accountability. This program, as it exists, is by far the best model for driving that accountability forward. Thank you.
On that, I do want to say the gentleman is right. We didn't really touch on the demand, and that we did have a tremendous demand, and we're not able to meet the demand that we had of those who wanted to participate in the incentive grant with the money that we were allocated. However, I do want to thank the governor for allocating the money that was allocated, and I do want to thank all of our panelists today. Thank you. This continues to be a tremendously important conversation, obviously not just to myself, but to my colleagues and in every district. I do want to say one thing. This is our second hearing, and in the first hearing we had someone say something I thought was really interesting, which was on some level we have decided that our clients really are the four-year universities instead of our young people. That we aren't providing them with a pathway to success, but we're only providing that pathway to those who can achieve a four-year university or a community college. And the notion that CTE is not a pathway to those things as well, I think, is false. And I just want to make sure it's very clear that there is a tremendous data that shows that young people that go into career technical education do actually end up in a four-year university, and if that's where they decide to go. But I know that in my district, many young people don't even know what's possible. They don't know the plethora of opportunities and careers that will lead them to homes or families where they can be successful. So I plead with everyone here. I plead with the governor's office that you remember that 70% of young people as you design your principles, as I have said before, and that we continue to work to a solution that is sustainable and in the best interest of the state of California. So thank you, everyone, for coming today.